Hey guys, so figured I would update the Porsche project because it's probably going to take a little bit of a hiatus for a while. Where we left off, we had discovered the messed up thrust bearing and the messed up block and all that, so we were kind of in a little holding pattern, and I've been doing some other stuff. But what we've done in the meantime, and there was some footage of this and apparently it's gone, I have taken the block where the chunk of bearing tang slot holder was gone, and I took it to work and I welded that up. I don't know if you can see it, but I welded that corner and then filed everything back down the best I could and die grinded it, and it's not perfect, but it is at least something. It'll keep that bearing from pounding out, and I think with the thrust fixed and all that, all will be good. So I did that, and then the block was cracked on the other side. Since I've gone this far, the crack ran all the way on the inside, so I ground all this out and welded all that up and die grinded it kind of flat. The fan covers all this anyway, and this is on the back side, so no one will ever be the wiser. Figure we've gone this far, let's replace JB weld with some metal. And then I did the same treatment to this slot where the bearing tang goes and got that. But I did discover upon closer inspection the block was, you could see a hairline crack up in there. So I ground that out to where part of it was actually open, and then preheated it to like 375 degrees, and then welded it, and then wrapped it up in a blanket and let it cool as slow as I could. Cleaned all that out, and then I filed all this, sanded, filed, you name it. So I think we're pretty good. There's some unfortunate die grinder marks in here, but I think we're a lot better off than we were. So then we turned our attention to the crankshaft, and I've got some footage that I forgot to take my camera with, and I took it to work and put it in the lathe so I could kind of fixture it up and measure how big the dent was. We're going to see if we can get that inserted here and show that little operation. Okay, I brought my crankshaft into work and forgot my camera, so I'm using my phone. See how this turns out. Right there is the dent that I think screwed up my thrust bearing. So as a way to quantify that, I have installed here in one lathe a test indicator, which I don't know if I can get you to see that. It might be kind of a screwy angle, but I'll try over here. So there's the test indicator. I don't know if it'll focus, but it's pointing to 0. If I rotate this by hand and get to the dent, see the needle go way up, drop down, back to roughly 0. So, and even if I run the indicator out, do the same thing, that thing is definitely raised. So instead of relying on strictly feel to see if I get that thing out of there, at least I've got this method to test it, so I'm going to work on somehow flattening that thing out. Alright, so, that light's not helping. I'm better off without light. Through various tools, I was able to sand that flat. So approaching, well, that won't focus, but approaching the dent, you can see the needle falls into the dent. A little collateral damage after from filing it and sanding it, mostly sanding with 400 grit paper on a flat straight edge. So the high spots are gone. So going through the dent, it's low, but not much I can do about that. It comes up, stays up, so it doesn't jump over something to fall into the divot. So hopefully with the correct end play and that thing flattened out, this thing will live. Alright, so let's look at our crankshaft now. Here it is. There's the thrust surface I worked on. I don't know if you can see that. Which was the original purpose for all this activity. So, figured when I had originally taken this engine apart and did all this back in the 80s, I did mic all this, and I had everything. It was they were standard bearings. I had it all written down. Everything was good. Put standard bearings in it. So using my micrometer and rechecked, see if anything's different. And it's a pretty finicky test here, so you gotta get the right feel. And again, I'm no engine builder. I just use these, making some stuff at work. So these are cheap micrometers too, but I used them against my expensive ones I borrowed from work, and they seem to test the same. So that was our number 1 main journal. This is a 1-to-2 mic. So let's see if we can read this. Let me get repositioned and we'll see what our number is. Alright, so I switched micrometers because there was no way I was going to be able to let y'all see what was going on with that one, just the lighting. So I went to this digital one that I borrowed from work. So anyway, you put it on here. This little thimble has like a ratchet in there, so you can't get it too tight. And you don't want it to wiggle back and forth because then you're too loose. You gotta get it just right. I guess if I did this more often, I'd know what the hell I was doing, but. Too tight. So you want to just slide over that round portion. So let's see here. Let's see if you can see this. So that's our number 1.9677 inches. See if it'll switch to metric. I zeroed it. Alright, we'll go with 1.677. So the spec in the book for the number 1 main journal is 1.9681 to 1.9675. So that's actually good. So I will go through here and I will. Number 1, we'll do number 2 and number 3. They're supposed to be the same size. They're actually larger than 2 inches. So I'll have to switch mics. And then number 4 is out here on the end, and it's like 1.5 inches. It's a lot smaller. And then we'll go through and do the rod bearings, and we will look at our results here in just a second. Alright, so I think I showed you what I had measured on the number 1 main bearing. We're several hours later. Mayhem kind of ensued. So, I guess you can hear mayhem in the background too. But I mic'd everything several times, and here is what we came up with. Let me see if we can prop this up. Look, a little whiteboard action. Alright, so let's freaking this. Of course, hopefully the glare won't kill us. Yeah, the glare kind of sucks. So, anyway, number 1 main is in spec. Number 2 and 3 main are the same size. 2.1645, 2.1643. They're barely in spec. Number 4 main, 15735, is actually out of spec, and that's kind of odd because that's the one that's up in the 3rd piece of the case of the engine. It's the one that hangs out here on the end by the crank pulley, I guess, if you had the pulley too tight. I guess you could wear that out. So they're kind of all really close to being good enough. You can put standard bearings in. So then I went ahead and checked the rods, which I don't remember doing when I did this engine originally. And so number 1 rod, 20744, spec 20860, 20861. So that's way off. They kind of get smaller from there. So that's the spec, and they're not even close. As I said, I don't remember checking them when I did this as a teenager. So one size under on the rods, 20768, 20763, not even close. Second size under, 20669, we're above that. So I don't know if this crank was ground, but anyway, I put standard bearings in it way back in the day. So if it was ground somewhere between. So what I'm looking at is this crankshaft is going to need to we have 1 main bearing that's out of spec. The other 3 are actually in spec. None of the rods are in spec. They're all out of spec. So I need to research and find myself somebody that can grind this crank, and we'll get the appropriate bearings. So I don't know how long that's going to take. We're in the middle of North Carolina. I don't think there's too many classic Porsche specialists around here. So I'm going to research and see what I can do as far as getting this crank ground. And I can get undersized mains are no problem. I can go 2 undersize on the rod bearings, which I should be good. That's as far as you can go under. Otherwise, it's a new crank. And while we're going to all that trouble, we'll see if they can grind the weld and fix the thrust surface. So we may be gone for a while. Plus this number 1 main has all these like vice marks on it, which is not for me. So anyway, we will do that, and we will let you know when we're done. Alright guys, so we went through the measuring process on this crankshaft through that's the number 1 main. That's the one with the thrust surface that was kind of jacked up, and hopefully we showed you some footage of trying to repair that. It doesn't look horribly bad. So then next is number 2 main, number 3 main, and the number 4 main is up here on the nose, and that's actually in the third piece of the case. And then I went and I mic'd the rod journals. Obviously there's 4 of those. So I'm going to bore you all the details of that mess. But let me show you the results. Let me put it over here where I can show you some numbers. Hopefully the glare is not too bad. So for the mains, number 1 is 19677 inches. So we're actually within spec. We're towards the bottom, but we're good. Number 2 and 3, 21643, 21645. We are right. We're good, just barely. Number 4 came in at 15735, and we are out of spec on that. We're 2/10 of a hundredths. We're at just barely out, but we're out, and that's kind of weird because that's out in the third piece of the case, which shouldn't have any load other than maybe somebody had the belt too tight for a long time. So anyway, so technically that's slightly undersized, but I was going to let it ride. And then I started looking at the rods, which I do not remember checking these when I put this together way back in the 80s. So those are the numbers, kind of all over the place. And then compared to spec, so number 1, 20744, that's our spec. We're like way out. Number 2 is actually smaller. Number 3 is smaller. Number 4 is the same as number 1. So I thought, well, maybe this crank was ground 1 under. 20768. Nope. Maybe it was ground 2 under. 20669. So we're in the 20660s. No. So our rod journals are between -1 is 0.25 millimeters undersized, -2 is 0.5 millimeters. So our rod journals are between both of them. So what I'm going to have to do is search for somebody to grind this crankshaft. So what I need to do is, ideally, if I'm going to go all this trouble, is have the mains, because this one's undersized. Number 4 is undersized. Have it ground 1 under, grind number 2 main, number 3 main, and number 4 main. And number 4 main has all these other like hammer marks. I don't know, somebody clamped this in a vise or something, but that was not me. And then maybe properly fix the thrust surface. I mean, I was going to let it ride, but if I'm going to this trouble, that'll probably need to be welded and turned back down, and then grind all the rod journals to make all that right. So for right now, I'm going to search for somebody that can do all this work for me, hopefully locally, hopefully not for $1 million. So this project may take a little may take a break for a while I work on all that. So anyway, thanks for watching, subscribing, and we'll see you back soon, and maybe we'll get this thing done soon.